"Insurance will cover it. Relax," Alaric said, not even looking up from his phone as my totaled BMW sat steaming in the tow truck. "Stop being so dramatic about everything." My whole family nodded along, like I was the unreasonable one for being upset that my brother had just destroyed my car while joyriding with his friends. But when the insurance adjuster called 3 days later, everything changed. "Hi, I'm Amelia." For years, my brother treated everything I owned like it was his personal property. My family always said I should be grateful he included me in anything, that I was too uptight about my possessions. But what they didn't know was that I had been quietly documenting every single incident, every dismissal, every time they chose his convenience over my boundaries. What were they really protecting? And why did they need me to stay silent? Let me show you what happened when the truth finally came to light. The phone call that would expose everything was just the beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Hi, I'm Amelia Hayes. At 28, I thought I had finally built a life that was mine. A corner office at Blackstone Financial, my own apartment in downtown Portland, and most importantly, a brand new BMW 330i that I had saved 3 years to buy, but in my family, nothing was ever really just mine. Growing up, I was the responsible one. While my younger brother Alaric spent his teenage years getting suspended from school and crashing his skateboard into our neighbor's fence, I was working part-time jobs and maintaining a 4.0 GPA. When he needed money for concert tickets, I was the one who lent it to him. When he got arrested for underage drinking, I was the one who bailed him out with my college fund. Our parents, Cedric and Joanne Hayes, always had the same response. "Family helps family, Amelia. You're so lucky to have a brother who needs you. Lucky." That's the word they used when Alaric borrowed my laptop for just one assignment and returned it with a cracked screen and a virus that wiped my senior thesis. Lucky when he wore my designer jacket to a party and came home with it reeking of cigarettes and beer. Lucky when he used my credit card for emergencies and racked up $600 in charges at gaming stores. But I learned to document everything. Every loan that went unpaid, every borrowed item that came back damaged, every time I was told to stop being so materialistic when I asked for my things back. I kept receipts, screenshots, photos, not because I planned to use them, but because keeping records was the only way I could prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. My family lived in Millbrook Heights, a suburban neighborhood where appearances mattered more than truth. Dad worked as a regional manager for a logistics company. Mom ran a small catering business from home, and Alaric was still finding himself at 25. He lived in my parents' basement, contributed nothing to household expenses, and somehow always managed to be the favorite. The dynamic was always the same. When something went wrong, it was either my fault for not helping enough, or it wasn't really a big deal, so I shouldn't be upset about it. When something went right, Alaric got the credit for really trying this time, while I got a pat on the head for doing what you're supposed to do anyway. 3 months before the crash, I had finally bought my dream car. Not a practical sedan, or a sensible hatchback, but a sleek BMW in midnight blue with leather seats and a sound system that made my morning commute feel like a luxury experience. I had researched every model, compared prices at 4 different dealerships, and negotiated the financing terms myself. When I drove it to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, Mom's first comment was, "Don't you think this is a bit much for someone your age?" Alaric circled the car like a predator sizing up prey. "Damn, Amelia, when can I take it for a spin?" "Never," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "This isn't a borrowing situation." Dad laughed from the porch. "Come on, honey. What's the point of having a nice car if you can't share it with family?" That was the problem with my family. Everything I worked for became community property, But nothing anyone else owned was ever expected to be shared with me. When Alaric had briefly owned a motorcycle, I wasn't allowed to even sit on it. When Dad bought a new fishing boat, it was understood that it was his personal sanctuary. But my achievements, my purchases, my boundaries, those were apparently selfish concepts. I started parking the BMW in the secure garage at my apartment complex instead of in my parents' driveway during visits. I stopped mentioning work bonuses or pay raises. I learned to deflect questions about my social life, my dating life, my plans for the future, because somehow every conversation became about what I could do for Alaric or why I wasn't being supportive. Enough. The pattern had been set for so long that I barely recognized it as abnormal anymore. It was just the price of being part of the Hayes family. I was the giver, he was the taker, and everyone else was the referee making sure I didn't complain too loudly about the arrangement. But patterns I was about to learn can only hold for so long before something breaks them completely. And when they do break, the truth that emerges isn't always what anyone expected to find. Looking back now, I realize that the crash wasn't really about the car. It was about something much deeper, something that had been building for years while I smiled and nodded and played the role of the understanding big sister. The car was just the catalyst that finally forced everyone to show their true cards. Because when you spend your whole life being told that your boundaries don't matter, eventually someone is going to cross a line so far that not even the most devoted family peacekeeper can ignore it. And when that happens, you start asking questions that maybe you should have been asking all along. The borrowing started small when we were teenagers. Alaric would take my clothes without asking, returning them wrinkled and sometimes stained. When I complained, Mom would say, "You two are practically the same size. It's not worth fighting over." By college, it had escalated. He'd use my textbooks and return them with pages torn out or highlighted in permanent marker. He'd eat food I'd bought with my work-study money, then act confused when I got upset. "It's just food, Amelia. Why are you being so weird about crackers?" The family always took his side, not because they agreed with his behavior, but because they expected me to be the mature one. "You know how Alaric is," Dad would say, as if being thoughtless was a medical condition that required accommodation rather than correction. After college, when I moved back home briefly to save money for my apartment deposit, the pattern intensified. Alaric would borrow my car while I was at work, returning it with the gas tank empty and fast food wrappers stuffed in the glove compartment. Once, I found a parking ticket in my name because he'd left it in a 2-hour zone for an entire day. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "I forgot to move it. Just pay the ticket and move on." "You forgot? It's a $60 fine." "So? You have a job." That became his standard defense. I had a job, therefore I had money. Therefore I should cover whatever consequences resulted from his carelessness. Mom and Dad nodded along with this logic as if it made perfect sense. The worst part wasn't the money or the inconvenience. It was the gaslighting that followed every incident. If I got angry, I was overreacting. If I set boundaries, I was being selfish. If I asked for accountability, I was holding grudges. No matter how reasonable my request or how justified my frustration, I somehow always ended up being the problem. I started keeping a notebook: date, incident, cost, family response. Page after page of documentation that painted a clear picture. Alaric took whatever he wanted, consequences fell on me, and everyone else acted like this was normal sibling dynamics. January 15th. Alaric borrowed my winter coat for a skiing trip, returned it with a broken zipper and a rip in the sleeve. Mom said, "Accidents happen," when I asked about replacement costs. March 3rd. Used my Netflix account and changed all the viewing profiles to his preferences. When I complained, Dad said I was being petty about streaming services. May 22nd. Took my spare apartment key without asking and gave it to his girlfriend so she could use my bathroom when they were walking in the neighborhood. I only found out when I came home to find a stranger in my living room. The notebook filled up quickly, too quickly. But every time I considered showing it to someone, I heard Mom's voice in my head. Why are you keeping score? That's not what families do. Except, keeping score was exactly what they were doing. They just counted different things. They counted every time I said no as evidence that I was selfish. They counted every time I got upset as proof that I was difficult. They counted every successful thing I did as a reason why I should give more to Alaric. When I got my first promotion at Blackstone Financial, the dinner conversation wasn't about my achievements. It was about how I should help Alaric update his resume. When I got my own apartment, the focus was on why I hadn't offered to let Alaric be my roommate. When I started dating someone seriously, the questions were about when I would introduce him to Alaric and whether he had any job connections that might help my brother. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My accomplishments were never celebrated for their own sake. They were immediately transformed into resources that the family could utilize. I wasn't Amelia, the successful financial advisor. I was Amelia, the person with connections, money, and space that could benefit everyone else. The dynamic was so deeply ingrained that I barely questioned it anymore. When Alaric needed a suit for job interviews, I bought him one. When he needed references, I asked my colleagues to vouch for him. When he needed transportation to get to those interviews, I rearranged my schedule to drive him. And when he inevitably didn't get the jobs because he showed up late or unprepared, somehow that became my fault too. I hadn't prepared him enough. I hadn't given him the right advice. I hadn't introduced him to the right people. The pattern was exhausting, but it was familiar. It was easier to give in than to fight. It was simpler to say yes than to endure the family-wide campaign that followed. Every no. It was less painful to absorb the costs and consequences than to listen to lectures about gratitude and family loyalty. But patterns, I was beginning to realize, don't just exist in isolation. They build on themselves, getting stronger and more entrenched over time. What starts as borrowing a sweater becomes borrowing a car, becomes borrowing a life. And sometimes, when the pattern has gone on long enough, it takes something dramatic to break it. Something that forces everyone to look at what they've been doing and who they've been protecting. Something that makes the costs visible in a way that can't be dismissed or explained away. I just didn't know yet that the something would be my car, and that the pattern wasn't the only thing that was about to be shattered. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports for the Morrison account. Mom's voice on my office phone sounded strained but carefully. Controlled, the tone she used when she was trying to manage a situation before it got out of hand. "Amelia, honey, there's been a small accident with your car." My stomach dropped. "What kind of accident? Where's my car?" "Well, Alaric needed to run some errands yesterday, and your father thought it would be fine if he borrowed it just for a few hours. You weren't using it anyway, right?" I gripped the phone tighter. "I was at work. That doesn't mean I wasn't using it. I need my car to get home from work." "Right. Well, that's what we figured too. But then Alaric's friend Jorvin called and asked if he wanted to go to this job fair in Westfield, and it seemed like such a good opportunity. Mom, what happened to my car?" A pause. The kind of pause that means the news is worse than the careful buildup suggests. There was an accident on Highway 34. Nothing too serious, but the car is, well, it's totaled. But don't worry, Alaric is completely fine, and insurance will cover everything. I set my pen down very carefully, using the motion to buy myself a few seconds to process. My 3-year dream car, the one I'd saved for and researched and negotiated for, was gone, taken without permission and destroyed. Is Alaric hurt? Just a few bruises. He's really shaken up about it, Amelia. He feels terrible. Where is he now? He's here at home. He's pretty upset, and your father thinks it might be better if you didn't come over tonight. You know how you get when you're angry, and he's already feeling bad enough. I stared at my computer screen, watching the numbers blur together as the implications sank in. My car was destroyed, my brother was fine, and I was the one who wasn't, allowed to have feelings about it. "I'm coming over," I said. "Honey, maybe you should wait until tomorrow when everyone's calmed down." "I'm coming over now." The drive to Millbrook Heights in my coworker's borrowed car felt surreal. I kept reaching for my usual coffee cup in the center console that wasn't there, kept adjusting mirrors that were already set for someone else. Everything was wrong, displaced, unfamiliar. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I could see Alaric through the living room window. He wasn't lying in bed recovering from his traumatic experience. He was playing video games on the couch, a bag of chips balanced on his chest, looking perfectly relaxed. Dad met me at the door with his hands up in a calming gesture. "Now, Amelia, before you get all worked up, remember that the important thing is that nobody was seriously hurt. Where are the police reports, the insurance information, the contact details for the other driver? Let's just take this one step at a time." I walked past him into the living room. Alaric glanced up from his game, then quickly looked away. His face was unmarked except for a small bandage on his forehead. He didn't look like someone who'd just survived a traumatic car crash. He looked like someone who'd been caught doing something he shouldn't have been doing. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "It wasn't my fault," he said immediately. "This guy ran a red light and hit me. I couldn't do anything about it." "Were you alone?" "No, Jorvin was with me. We were heading to that job fair I told you about. Something about his tone struck me as off. Too practiced, like he'd rehearsed this explanation. What time did this happen?" "Like 2 in the afternoon. I pulled out my phone and checked the location for the job fair he'd mentioned. The Westfield Career Expo ended at 1 o'clock. It was a half-day event." Alaric's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, well, we were going to check out some other places after. Network or whatever." "What other places?" "Just like businesses and stuff." "I don't remember exactly." Dad stepped in. "The important thing is that Alaric is safe and that insurance will take care of everything. Your car can be replaced." "My car that he took without permission." "It's not like you were using it," Alaric said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "You were at work? The car was just sitting there." "That doesn't give you permission to take it." Mom appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of sandwiches, as if we were having a pleasant family gathering instead of discussing the destruction of my property. "Everyone's upset right now. Why don't we have some lunch and talk about this calmly?" "I don't want lunch. I want to know exactly what happened to my car and what's being done about it." "What's being done about it," Dad said, "is that we're handling the insurance claim and making sure everything gets sorted out properly. You don't need to worry about the details." That phrase hit me like a slap. You don't need to worry about the details. About my car, my insurance, my property. They were handling it, which meant they were controlling the narrative and the outcome. "Actually, I do need to worry about the details. It's my car and my insurance policy." "Well, technically," Mom said, "Alaric was listed as an approved driver on your policy, so everything should be covered." I stared at her. "No, he wasn't." "Yes, he was. When you bought the car, remember? We talked about it at Sunday dinner. You said you'd add him just in case of emergencies. I had no memory of this conversation, and I definitely hadn't added Alaric to my insurance. I kept meticulous records of all my policies and payments. But arguing about it now, in front of everyone, felt like a losing battle. "I want to see the police report," I said. "It's not ready yet," Alaric said quickly. "They said it would take a few days." "Then I want the contact information for the other driver and their insurance company." "We don't have that yet either. The police are handling all that stuff." Everything about this felt wrong. The timing, the explanations, the way everyone seemed more focused on managing my reaction than on addressing what had actually happened. But I was outnumbered, and every question I asked made me seem like the unreasonable one who cared more about a car than her brother's well-being. I left that evening with more questions than answers, and a growing suspicion that the story I was being told wasn't the complete truth. But I had no proof, no leverage, and no support from anyone who mattered. What I did have was a totaled car, a brother who felt terrible, but not responsible, and a family that seemed more invested in protecting him than in helping me understand what had really happened. The real investigation I was about to learn would have to be one I conducted myself. The next morning, I called Westfield Police Department myself. The desk sergeant was polite but firm when I explained that I was calling about an accident involving my vehicle the previous day. "I can't give you information over the phone about an ongoing investigation," he said. "But if you're the registered owner, you can come in and request a copy of the report once it's filed. How long does that usually take?" "For a standard traffic accident? Usually 24 to 48 hours. I drove to Westfield during my lunch break. The police station was a modern building with glass walls and efficient lighting that made everything feel official and serious. The desk sergeant checked his computer, frowned, and checked again. "I'm not showing any accident reports from yesterday involving a blue BMW with your license plate number," he said. My chest tightened. Could it be filed under a different name? My brother was driving. He typed in Alaric's name and date of birth. Nothing. "Ma'am, there's no record of any traffic accident involving your vehicle. Are you sure about the date and location?" I was sure, but clearly, someone wasn't telling me the truth. Back at my apartment that evening, I called my insurance company. The customer service representative was helpful, but confused. "I don't see any claims filed on your policy," she said. "And I'm not showing an Alaric Hayes as an authorized driver on your account." "Could someone have called to add him recently?" "Any changes to your policy would require verification of your identity and would generate a confirmation email to your registered address. I'm not seeing any recent modifications." I hung up and stared at my laptop screen, trying to piece together what was happening. My car was supposedly totaled in a police-reported accident, but there was no police report. Insurance was supposedly covering everything, but no claim had been filed. Alaric was supposedly an authorized driver, but he wasn't on my policy either. Everyone was lying to me or I was losing my mind. I called Dad. "I went to the police station today. They don't have any record of an accident." "Well, maybe it takes longer than they said. You know how bureaucracy works." I also called my insurance company. "No claim has been filed and Alaric isn't an authorized driver." A long pause. "Maybe we should sit down and talk about this as a family. Maybe you should tell me where my car actually is." "Your car is at Morrison's Towing and Recovery. It's totaled, Amelia. I've seen it myself." At least that was something concrete. I called Morrison's and spoke to the owner, a gruff-voiced man who sounded like he'd been in the business for decades. "Yeah, we've got a blue BMW here. Brought it in yesterday evening. Pretty messed up." "Was it in an accident?" "Well, it's damaged, if that's what you're asking." "Look, miss, I don't ask too many questions about how cars end up in my yard. People call, I pick them up, they pay the storage fees. Can I come see it?" "Sure, but it's not going anywhere. Things totaled for sure." Morrison's Towing was in an industrial area 20 minutes outside Westfield, surrounded by a chain-link fence and filled with damaged vehicles in various states of decay. The owner, a stocky man in coveralls, led me to the back corner where my BMW sat under a blue tarp. When he pulled the tarp away, I gasped. The car wasn't just damaged from a collision. It looked like it had been in multiple accidents, or maybe rolled several times. The roof was partially crushed, the driver's side was completely caved in, and the front end was crumpled beyond recognition. "What kind of accident causes this much damage?" I asked. The owner shrugged. "Could be anything. High-speed crash, Hit multiple obstacles, maybe rolled down an embankment? Hard to say without seeing it happen. I walked around the car, taking pictures with my phone. The damage was extensive, but something about it looked strange. The pattern of destruction didn't match what I'd expect from a simple red light collision. Do you have any paperwork about how this got here? Just a work order saying to pick it up from Highway 34 and hold it pending insurance evaluation. Who called for the pickup? He checked his clipboard. Alaric Hayes. Not the police. Not my insurance company. My brother had called the towing company himself. That evening, I sat in my apartment with printouts of every document I'd gathered, trying to make sense of the timeline. My brother had taken my car without permission, supposedly to go to a job, fare that had ended hours before the alleged accident. There was no police report, no insurance claim, and no record of the collision he described. But my car was definitely destroyed, and he had arranged to have it towed to a private lot. I called Jorvan Stradal, the friend who had supposedly been with Alaric during the accident. I'd met him a few times at family gatherings, a thin guy with nervous energy who always seemed to be looking for an excuse to leave. Hey, Jorvan, it's Amelia, Alaric's sister. Oh, hey. Look, about yesterday, I'm really sorry about your car. That was so messed up. Can you tell me what happened? What do you mean? The accident. You were there, right? Long silence. Yeah. It happened really fast. What time was this? I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4? That was a different time than Alaric had told me. Where exactly did it happen? On the highway, near that exit with the gas station. Which exit? I don't remember exactly. I was pretty shaken up. Was anyone else hurt? No, just us. Well, just Alaric. Really? I was fine. What about the other driver? Another long silence. What other driver? My stomach dropped. The one who ran the red light and hit you. Oh, right. Yeah, that guy. He was fine too, I think. Jorvan was a terrible liar, and it was becoming clear that he was trying to remember a story he hadn't helped create. Jorvan, what really happened to my car? I can't talk about this, Amelia. You need to ask Alaric. He hung up. I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by evidence that painted a picture I didn't want to see. My brother had taken my car without permission, destroyed it through some unknown activity that wasn't a simple traffic accident, and then convinced my entire family to help him cover it up with a story that fell apart under the slightest scrutiny. The question wasn't what had happened to my car. The question was what my brother had been doing that was so bad that an elaborate lie seemed like the better option than the truth. And as I stared at the photos of my mangled BMW, I realized I was about to find out exactly what kind of person my family thought was worth protecting, and what kind of person they thought was worth lying to. The call from Pinnacle Insurance came at 2:17 p.m. on Thursday, while I was in a meeting with potential clients. I almost didn't answer, but something about the timing felt urgent. Miss Hayes? This is Detective Sarah Chen with Pinnacle Insurance's Fraud Investigation Unit. We need to discuss a claim that was filed on your BMW policy yesterday. I stepped out of the conference room, my heart racing. I didn't file a claim. I called my insurance company 2 days ago and they said no claim existed. That's correct. But someone did attempt to file a fraudulent claim using your policy number and personal information. We've been investigating similar cases in your area, and your vehicle has come up in our inquiry. What kind of investigation? We're looking into a ring of staged accidents and insurance fraud. Your car was found at an illegal street racing event that was raided by police Tuesday morning. 3 people were arrested, including the driver of your vehicle. The world tilted. Street racing, not a job fair, not a red light collision, not an accident at all. Who was driving my car? According to our records, a 25-year-old male named Alaric Hayes. Is this someone you know? He's my brother. Did you give him permission to use your vehicle for illegal racing activities? I didn't give him permission to use my vehicle. At all. There was a pause while she made notes. Miss Hayes, I need to inform you that attempting to file a false insurance claim is a felony. Your brother is currently being charged with reckless driving, participating in illegal racing, and insurance fraud. There may be additional charges pending. I leaned against the wall, trying to process what she was telling me. What happened to my car? Based on witness statements and physical evidence, your vehicle was involved in a high-speed collision during an organized race on private property. The driver lost control and crashed into a concrete barrier. The damage was severe because of the speed involved. Was anyone else hurt? Your brother sustained minor injuries. His passenger, a Jorvin Stradal, was treated for shock but released. No other vehicles were involved in the actual crash, so there was no other driver. No red light collision. No, ma'am. The story about a traffic accident appears to have been fabricated to cover up the illegal racing activity. After I hung up, I sat in my office for 20 minutes, staring at my hands and trying to understand what I'd just learned. My brother hadn't borrowed my car for a job fair. He'd stolen it to go street racing, crashed it while driving recklessly, and then convinced my entire family to help him lie about it to cover up his criminal activity. But there was more. The insurance fraud charge meant he hadn't just crashed my car, he'd tried to profit from it. Detective Chen had mentioned a ring of staged accidents, which suggested this wasn't his first time. I called my parents' house. Dad answered on the second ring. I just got a call from an insurance fraud investigator, I said without preamble. Silence. They told me Alaric was arrested for street racing in my car. They told me he tried to file a fraudulent insurance claim. They told me this isn't the first time. Amelia, let me explain. You knew. We knew he'd made some mistakes. You knew he was using my car for illegal activities, and you helped him lie about it. It's more complicated than that. Actually, it's not. He stole my car, used it to commit crimes, destroyed it, and then you all helped him try to commit insurance fraud to cover it up. I heard Mom's voice in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. Where is he now? I asked. He's been released on bail pending his court date. Who paid his bail? Another pause. We took out a loan against the house. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You mortgaged your home to bail out someone who committed felony fraud using my car. He's our son, Amelia. He made a mistake. Multiple felonies aren't mistakes, Dad. They're choices. That evening, I drove to Millbrook Heights one more time. I found Alaric in the garage, working on what looked like engine parts spread across Dad's workbench. He looked up when I walked in, and for the first time in years, I saw something like fear in his eyes. The insurance investigator called me, I said. He set down the wrench he was holding. Look, I can explain. I'm listening. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was just going to watch, maybe make a few bets. But then Tony challenged me, and I couldn't back down in front of everyone. Tony? He runs the races. He's the one who got me into it in the first place. I'd been going for a few months, just watching mostly. A few months. How many times have you taken my car? He looked away. Just a couple times before this, and I always brought it back fine. Until you crashed it while committing multiple felonies. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. But when it happened, I panicked. Tony said if we reported it as a regular accident, insurance would cover it and nobody would have to know about the racing. So you decided to commit fraud. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was hurt and scared, and everyone was yelling about police and arrests. Tony said he knew how to handle this kind of thing. I stared at him. This person I'd spent my entire life helping and defending and making excuses for. You involved me in a felony. You used my car, my insurance, my identity to commit crimes. I was going to pay you back. With what money? I've been winning at the races. Good money, too. I just had one bad night. You've been gambling. Racing isn't gambling, it's skill. I'm actually pretty good at it when I don't crash. The casual way he said it, like illegal street racing was a hobby instead of a criminal enterprise, made something snap inside me. "You're going to pay for everything," I said. "The car, the insurance deductible, the legal fees, all of it." "With what?" "I don't have that kind of money." "Then you're going to get a job and figure it out." "Come on, Amelia. Family helps family, right? That's what we do." He was smiling now, that familiar boyish grin that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. The same smile that had convinced me to lend him money, convinced our parents to make excuses for him, convinced everyone that his problems were really other people's responsibilities. But I wasn't smiling back. "Family helps family," I repeated. "But you're not family anymore. You're a criminal who happens to share my last name." The smile faded. "And tomorrow, everyone is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, 3 file folders, and a legal pad covered in notes. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic from the street below. I'd always been methodical, but now, that methodical nature was about to become my weapon. I opened the first folder, labeled Financial Records. Inside were bank statements showing every loan I'd made to Alaric over the past 5 years. Car payments when he couldn't make them. Rent money when he was between jobs. Credit card payments when he'd accidentally overspent. The total came to $23,147. Money I'd never expected to see again. Money I'd written off as the cost of being a supportive sister. But now I knew where that money had really gone. Not to job hunting or getting back on his feet. To illegal street racing, gambling, and whatever other activities my family had been helping him hide. The second folder contained documentation about my car. Purchase agreement, insurance policies, maintenance records, registration renewal notices. Every piece of paper that proved the BMW was mine and mine alone. No co-signers, no joint ownership, no ambiguity about who was responsible for the vehicle that was now sitting destroyed in Morrison's towing yard. The third folder was new, started just that evening. It contained printouts of my conversations with Detective Chen, notes from my call with the Westfield Police Department, and screenshots of news articles about illegal street racing rings in our area. One article from 3 months ago caught my attention. Local man arrested in connection with underground racing circuit. The photo showed a young man being led away in handcuffs. Not Alaric, but someone who looked familiar. I squinted at the image, then pulled out my phone and scrolled through photos from recent family gatherings. There, in the background of Alaric's birthday party last spring, was the same man. Tony something, according to the article. Tony Drex, 28, charged with organizing illegal racing events and money laundering. My brother hadn't just stumbled into street racing. He'd been involved with organized criminals for months, possibly longer. And my family had known enough about his activities to help him create an elaborate cover story when things went wrong. I opened my laptop and started researching Tony Drex more thoroughly. The deeper I dug, the more disturbed I became. Multiple arrests for racketeering, illegal gambling, and fraud. Associates with connections to larger criminal organizations. This wasn't some group of young guys having fun with fast cars. This was serious criminal enterprise, and my brother was apparently deep enough in it to warrant being bailed out when caught. At 11:30 p.m., my phone rang. Mom's number appeared on the screen. "Amelia, honey, can we talk?" Her voice sounded strained, older than usual. I almost felt sorry for her. "What do you want to talk about?" "About today. About everything that's happened. I think there might be some things you don't understand about the situation." "What don't I understand?" "It's complicated. Alaric got involved with some people who aren't very nice. When this happened, we were worried about what might happen to him if the truth came out." "You mean you were worried about him facing consequences for his choices?" "These people he was with, they're dangerous, Amelia. If he couldn't pay them what he owed, we were afraid they might hurt him." A chill ran down my spine. What does he owe them? Money. A lot of money. More than we can afford. How much? $50,000. I set my pen down carefully. $50,000. No wonder they'd mortgaged their house to bail him out. They weren't just dealing with legal fees and car replacement costs. They were dealing with criminal debt. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? We didn't want to involve you. We thought we could handle it quietly. Get Alaric away from these people and start over somewhere else. Start over somewhere else? Your father has been looking at jobs in other states. We thought maybe if we moved away, Alaric could get a fresh start and these people would forget about the money he owes. They weren't just covering up his crimes. They were planning to help him flee from the consequences entirely. Pack up and move away, leaving his debts and legal troubles behind, probably expecting that eventually I'd contribute to their fresh start fund once they'd gotten settled. Mom, you realize that's not how criminal debt works, right? You can't just move to another state and pretend it never happened. We don't know what else to do. He's our son, and I'm your daughter. But apparently that doesn't matter when it comes to protecting me from being involved in felony fraud. That wasn't supposed to happen. Alaric said the insurance thing would be simple. Just a way to get enough money to pay off what he owed so we could all move on. Simple. They'd thought defrauding my insurance company was a simple solution to their problem. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the district attorney's office. I'm going to tell them everything I know about Alaric's criminal activities, about the fraud attempt, and about your family's involvement in covering it up. Silence. Unless what? Unless by tomorrow afternoon, I have a complete confession. From everyone involved, a detailed plan for paying back every dollar this has cost me, and Alaric's agreement to cooperate fully with law enforcement. Amelia, you can't be serious. These people will hurt him if he cooperates with police. Then he should have thought about that before he got involved with them. You're talking about destroying your own family. My family destroyed itself when you decided to involve me in criminal activity without my knowledge or consent. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment thinking about what my mother had told me. $50,000 in criminal debt, plans to flee the state, a willingness to commit insurance fraud to fund their escape. My family hadn't just been covering up Alaric's mistakes. They'd been actively participating in criminal conspiracy. I opened my laptop and started typing a detailed timeline of events. Every conversation, every inconsistency in their story, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. If I was going to the district attorney, I needed to present a clear, documented case that left no room for misinterpretation. At 1 a.m., I received a text from an unknown number. Your brother owes us money. You seem like a smart girl who pays her bills. Maybe you can help him remember why that's important. I screenshot the message immediately, then blocked the number. But the implication was clear. Tony Drex or someone associated with him had gotten my contact information. They knew where I worked, probably where I lived. My brother's criminal associations had just become my problem whether I wanted them to or not. I called Detective Chen's after-hours number, the one she'd given me for emergencies. I've been threatened, I said without preamble when she answered. Someone texting about my brother's debts, implying that I should pay them? What exactly did the message say? I read it to her word for word. Miss Hayes, I need to ask you to consider accepting police protection while we investigate this further. The people your brother was involved with have a history of intimidating family members to collect debts. What kind of protection? We can arrange for regular patrol car visits to your home and workplace. We can also expedite the investigation into your brother's activities if you're willing to cooperate as a witness. What would that involve? Providing a formal statement about the fraud attempt, any knowledge you have of your brother's criminal activities, and potentially testifying if the case goes to trial. And if I don't cooperate? Then your brother's case proceeds without your testimony. These people continue to view you as a potential source of payment for his debts, and you remain at risk until this resolves itself one way or another. It wasn't really a choice. I could cooperate with law enforcement and help build a case that might actually put these criminals away, or I could stay silent and hope they eventually forgot about me. What do you need me to do? Can you come in tomorrow morning? We'll need to record a formal statement and discuss what information you have about your brother's activities. I have quite a bit of information. Good. Bring everything you have. Documentation, photos, text messages, anything that might be relevant. After we hung up, I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the parking lot behind my building. A dark sedan sat at the far edge, engine running, headlights off. It could have been someone making a phone call or waiting for someone. It could also have been someone watching my apartment. I closed the blinds and triple-checked my door locks. Back at the kitchen table, I continued working on my timeline. Every loan, every lie, every time my family had chosen Alaric's comfort over my boundaries or safety. The pattern was even clearer now in black and white. Years of enabling had led to this moment where criminal organizations were texting me threats and my parents were planning to flee the state. At 3 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Dad. Amelia, we need to talk. It's 3 in the morning. I know what time it is. I also know you talked to the police tonight. How do you know that? Because someone called the house asking questions about you. Someone who wasn't very polite. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions? About where you work, whether you have money, whether you're close to your family. I didn't answer them, but they seemed to know quite a bit about our situation already. Dad, you need to call the police right now. I can't do that. Why not? Because if we involve the police any further, Alaric will go to prison for years. These people will disappear and will never be safe. You're not safe now. They're threatening your entire family, which is why we need to handle this quietly. We've been talking to a lawyer. There might be a way to work out a payment plan. Get Alaric into a rehabilitation program. Make this go away without anyone going to jail. A payment plan for $50,000. We'll figure it out. Sell the house, liquidate the retirement accounts, get a second mortgage, whatever it takes. And you expect me to contribute to this payment plan. You're part of this family, Amelia. When one of us is in trouble, we all pitch in. When one of you commits crimes using my property, I become a victim, not a co-conspirator. Don't be dramatic. Nobody meant for you to get hurt. I'm being threatened by organized criminals because of choices Alaric made. That's not drama. That's consequences. So what are you going to do? Send your own brother to prison? The question hung in the air between us. What was I going to do? For 28 years, I'd been the responsible one, the problem solver, the family member who sacrificed her own interests to keep everyone else comfortable. I'd given money, time, energy, and opportunities to people who had never given me the same consideration in return. Now they wanted me to sacrifice my safety and potentially my freedom to cover up serious crimes. They wanted me to become an active participant in criminal conspiracy rather than hold Alaric accountable for his choices. Dad, I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to stop protecting someone who refuses to protect himself or anyone around him. He's your brother, and I'm your daughter. But that seems to matter less than keeping Alaric from facing the natural consequences of his actions. This will destroy our family. This family destroyed itself when you chose to involve me in criminal activity without my knowledge or consent. I'm just refusing to be destroyed along with it. After I hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen thinking about what Dad had said. This will destroy our family. Maybe it would. But what kind of family was worth preserving if it required covering up crimes and enabling someone who put everyone around him at risk? I looked at the clock. 4:17 a.m. In a few hours, I had an appointment with Detective Chen. I would give her everything I'd documented, everything I'd discovered, and everything I'd been told about my brother's criminal activities. I would formally become a cooperating witness in a case that would likely send Alaric to prison and expose my parents as accessories to fraud. It would destroy the family I'd grown up in. But maybe it would save the person I was trying to become. Spent the remaining hours until dawn organizing my evidence, practicing what I would say, and preparing for a conversation that would change everything forever. By the time the sun came up, I was ready to stop being Alaric's victim and start being his accountability. The girl who had spent her life documenting other people's behavior was finally ready to let those documents speak for themselves. Detective Chen's office at 9 a.m. was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of a cramped, cluttered space with fluorescent lighting, it was modern and organized, with large windows that let in natural light and made everything feel less intimidating. She was younger than her voice had suggested over the phone. Maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail as I spread my evidence across her conference table. "This is quite comprehensive," she said, flipping through my financial records folder. "You've been documenting his behavior for years." I started keeping records because I felt like I was going crazy. Everyone kept telling me I was overreacting or misremembering things. Classic gaslighting technique, very common in families where one member is enabled to the point of criminal behavior. She paused at a bank statement showing a $3,200 transfer to Alaric last December. What was this payment for? He said his car had been repossessed and he needed money to get it back so he could look for work. Turns out he'd never owned a car to begin with. Detective Chen made notes as we went through each document. The pattern was clear even to someone seeing it for the first time. Years of escalating financial demands, each justified by increasingly elaborate stories that never quite added up. "Miss Hayes, I need to inform you that your cooperation today likely makes you eligible for witness protection if we determine the threats against you are credible." "How do you determine that?" "We've been monitoring communications between Tony Drex's organization and your family. Your brother owes significantly more than the $50,000 your mother mentioned. The total debt, including interest and penalties for the crashed car, is closer to $80,000. My stomach dropped. 80,000? Street racing isn't just about the gambling. These organizations use the races to launder money from other criminal enterprises. When someone crashes a valuable vehicle during a race, they become liable for the laundering fees as well as their gambling debts. And they expect me to help pay this? They expect someone in your family to pay it. You have a stable job and no apparent criminal connections, which makes you an attractive target for coercion. We spent 2 hours going through everything. By the end, Detective Chen had recorded a formal statement, photographed all my evidence, and explained what would happen next. "We'll be executing search warrants on your parents' home and your brother's possessions today. We'll also be issuing additional charges related to the fraud attempt and money laundering. Your brother will likely be arrested again within 48 hours. What should I do about my family? My advice? Stay away from them until this is resolved. If they contact you, let us know immediately. Don't meet with them alone, and don't let them pressure you into changing your testimony." I left the police station feeling lighter than I had in days, but also terrified. I'd just set in motion a series of events that would destroy the only family I'd ever known. But that family had already destroyed itself. I was just refusing to be buried in the wreckage. My phone started ringing before I reached my car. Mom's number flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, then another. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. The first message was Mom crying, "Amelia, please call us back. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret forever." The second was Dad, angry. "What you're doing is vindictive and cruel. Your brother made mistakes, but this will ruin all of our lives." The third was Alaric himself. "I know you're mad, but this is crazy. These people will hurt all of us if you don't back down. Please." I deleted all 3 messages without finishing them. At 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see my entire family standing in the hallway. Mom clutching a tissue, Dad with his jaw set in that stubborn way that meant he was prepared for a fight, and Alaric looking pale and desperate. I didn't open the door. "We know you're in there," Dad called through the wood. "We need to talk about what you've done." "I already talked to the police about what I've done," I called back, "and what all of you have done." "Open the door, Amelia." Mom's voice was pleading. "Please, we're still your family." My family wouldn't have involved me in criminal conspiracy without my knowledge. "It wasn't supposed to involve you?" Alaric said. "It was supposed to be simple." I opened the door then, keeping the security chain latched so only a few inches of space remained between us. Simple like borrowing my car was simple? Simple like the insurance fraud was simple? Which part of involving me in organized crime was supposed to be simple, Alaric? He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly, the kind of exhaustion that comes from stress rather than physical exertion. "I never meant for it to get this bad. But it did get this bad. And instead of taking responsibility, you convinced our parents to help you commit additional crimes." Dad stepped forward. "What's done is done. The question now is whether you're going to help us fix this or whether you're going to destroy your own family out of spite." "I'm not destroying anything. You destroyed it when you decided that protecting Alaric from consequences was more important than protecting me from being involved in his criminal activities." "The police were here this morning," Mom said. "They searched our house, took Alaric's computer, went through all our financial records. The neighbors saw everything." "Good. How can you say that?" Her voice broke. "These are the people who raised you, who loved you, who gave you everything. You gave me everything except honesty, respect, and the basic consideration of not involving me in felony fraud." Alaric pressed his face closer to the crack in the door. "Amelia, you don't understand what these people are like. If I go to prison, they'll assume I cooperated with police to reduce my sentence. They'll go after everyone I care about. You should have thought about that before you got involved with them. I was trying to make money to pay you back. All those loans you gave me, I was trying to win enough to pay you back with interest. By committing crimes with my property, I thought I could handle it. I thought I was good enough to win consistently." I stared at him through the narrow opening. This person I'd spent my entire life protecting, enabling, making excuses for. He was still trying to make this someone else's fault, still trying to find an angle that would get him sympathy instead of accountability. "Alaric, in 30 minutes, Detective Chen is going to call me to confirm that you haven't tried to intimidate me into changing my testimony. What should I tell her?" "Tell her we never came here," Dad said quickly. "Tell her we haven't contacted you." "Why would I lie to the police about that?" "Because if you tell them we came here, they'll arrest us for witness intimidation." I looked at the 3 of them standing in my hallway, my parents who had raised me to believe that family loyalty meant accepting abuse, and my brother who had never learned that actions have consequences because someone had always been willing to absorb those consequences for him. "You're right," I said. "If I tell Detective Chen that you came here to pressure me into changing my testimony, she'll probably arrest you for witness intimidation. That would be the natural consequence of trying to intimidate a witness." "So you won't tell her?" Mom asked hopefully. "I'm going to tell her exactly what happened. Just like I told her exactly what happened with my car, exactly what happened with the insurance fraud, and exactly what I know about Alaric's criminal activities." I started to close the door, but Alaric wedged his foot in the gap. "Wait, what if I confess? What if I take full responsibility and make sure you're not involved in any of it?" "You mean what if you do what you should have done in the first place?" "Yes, exactly. I'll tell them you didn't know anything, that I used your car and your insurance information without permission. I'll make sure you're completely clear of everything." "And the $80,000 you owe to organized criminals?" His face went white. "How do you know about that?" "I know about all of it, Alaric. The money laundering, Tony Drex, the plan to flee the state. I know everything." Dad grabbed Alaric's arm. "We need to leave. Now." "She's going to destroy us all," Mom whispered. I looked at her through the crack in the door. This woman who had raised me to believe that my needs and boundaries were less important than keeping peace in the family, who had taught me that love meant accepting mistreatment, and that loyalty meant enabling destructive behavior. "I'm not destroying you," I said quietly. "I'm just refusing to be destroyed along with you." I closed the door, fastened all the locks, and called Detective Chen. "They just left," I told her. "All three of them. They wanted me to lie about the witness intimidation." "Are you safe?" "I'm safe. But I think they know this is really over now." "Good. We'll be making additional arrests this evening. Your brother's confession won't change the charges against him, but it might help with sentencing if he cooperates fully." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized that for the first time in years, I felt completely alone. But alone felt different than abandoned. Alone felt like freedom. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of life continuing: traffic, neighbors talking, someone playing music. The world hadn't stopped because my family had imploded. Life was going on, and for the first time, I was free to participate in it on my own terms. The girl who had spent 28 years being responsible for everyone else's choices had finally learned to be responsible, only for her own. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment across town, reading a letter from the district attorney's office. Alaric had been sentenced to 4 years in state prison for insurance fraud, money laundering, and participation in organized criminal activity. He'd ultimately cooperated with authorities, helping them dismantle Tony Drex's entire operation, but the cooperation hadn't been enough to avoid significant prison time. My parents had received 2 years of probation for accessory charges related to the insurance fraud cover-up. They'd lost their house to pay legal fees and restitution and had moved to a small rental in a different county. We hadn't spoken since that day at my apartment door. I folded the letter and set it on my kitchen table next to a stack of other mail I'd been putting off reading. Bills in my name only, correspondence from my job, invitations to social events I actually wanted to attend. Normal adult mail that belonged to a person who existed independently of other people's problems. The new apartment was smaller than my old one, but it felt larger somehow. Brighter. I'd chosen it specifically because it was in a complex with security gates and covered parking, practical measures that helped me feel safer, but also symbolic of the boundaries I'd learned to create and maintain. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I'd gotten better about answering unknown calls since the criminal threats had stopped. "Is this Amelia Hayes?" "Yes." "This is Jennifer Caldwell from Channel 12 News. We're doing a follow-up story on the street racing bust from last year. Your brother's case was mentioned as one of the key prosecutions that helped shut down the operation. Would you be willing to speak on camera about the impact of organized crime on families?" I'd gotten several similar calls over the past few months. Reporters wanting to interview the sister who'd turned in her own brother. Legal advocates asking me to speak at conferences about family enablement. Even a few documentary filmmakers interested in my story. I appreciate the interest, but I'm not doing interviews about my family situation. I understand your hesitation, but your story could really help other people who are dealing with similar family dynamics. Sometimes hearing from someone who's been through it, Ms. Caldwell, I said, "No, please don't call this number again." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. One thing I'd learned over the past 6 months was that no was a complete sentence, and I didn't owe anyone explanations or justifications for my boundaries. The therapy sessions had helped with that. Dr. Martinez, a specialist in family trauma and codependency, had been recommended by Detective Chen. Initially, I'd resisted the idea that I needed therapy. After all, I wasn't the one who'd committed crimes or enabled criminal behavior. But Dr. Martinez had helped me understand that being the victim of family manipulation created its own set of psychological challenges. You've spent most of your adult life believing that your value came from what you could provide to other people, she'd said during one of our early sessions. Learning to value yourself independently of your utility to others is a significant adjustment. She was right. The first few months after cutting contact with my family had been strange and disorienting. Without Alaric's constant crises to manage, without my parents' emotional demands to meet, without the familiar rhythm of giving and sacrificing and accommodating, I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be. I'd started small. Buying groceries without considering what anyone else might want to eat. Choosing weekend activities based on my own interests rather than family obligations. Declining invitations that didn't appeal to me without feeling guilty about disappointing someone. It sounds trivial, but for someone who'd spent years prioritizing everyone else's preferences, making choices based solely on my own desires felt revolutionary. Work had become more satisfying too. Without the constant stress of family drama and financial demands, I'd been able to focus entirely on my career. I'd been promoted to senior financial advisor 3 months ago, with a salary increase that allowed me to rebuild my savings account and start planning for a future that belonged entirely to me. My social life had improved as well. Without always being broke from lending money to Alaric, and without constantly canceling plans to deal with family emergencies, I'd been able to develop real friendships with colleagues and neighbors. People who knew me as Amelia the person, not Amelia the sister of someone who needed constant management. I'd even started dating someone. Marcus Chen, a software developer who lived in my building, was nothing like the guys I'd been attracted to before. He was stable, employed, and had never once asked me to lend him money or solve his problems. Our relationship was refreshingly equal, built on mutual interests and respect rather than my usefulness in managing his life. The strangest part of my new life was how quiet it was. No more 2 a.m. phone calls about Alaric's latest crisis. No more weekend visits that turned into intervention sessions about his behavior. No more family dinners where I was expected to provide solutions to problems I hadn't created. At first, the quiet felt lonely. I'd been conditioned to interpret calm as abandonment, peace as neglect. But gradually, I'd learned to recognize the difference between being alone and being lonely, between solitude and isolation. I was alone more often now, but I was rarely lonely. And when I did feel the need for connection, it came from people who valued my company rather than my capacity to solve their problems. The financial recovery had taken time, but it was finally complete. The insurance company had ultimately paid out on my car, once Alaric's criminal conviction proved that I'd been the victim of theft, rather than a willing participant in fraud. I'd used the money to buy a reliable used car, nothing flashy or expensive, just dependable transportation that belonged to me and only me. I'd also recovered some of the money I'd lent to Alaric over the years through the restitution process. Not all of it, but enough to make a difference in rebuilding my financial stability. More importantly, I'd learned to view my money as mine, to keep, rather than as resources to be distributed to family members who refused to manage their own finances. The legal process had been exhausting, but ultimately empowering. Testifying in court, seeing my documentation taken seriously by judges and attorneys, watching the justice system actually hold people accountable for their choices rather than making excuses for them, had been validating in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time in my life, authority figures had listened to my concerns and taken action to protect me, rather than pressuring me to accept mistreatment for the sake of family harmony. I'd kept some of the documentation from that period, not because I needed it anymore, but because it reminded me of what I'd learned about the importance of believing my own experiences. The notebooks full of incident reports, the bank statements showing years of financial exploitation, the screenshots of threatening messages, all of it served as evidence that my decision to break from my family had been based on facts rather than emotions. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd continued to enable Alaric's behavior, if I'd helped pay off his criminal debts, if I'd stayed silent about the insurance fraud, If I'd allowed my family to continue treating my boundaries as optional suggestions rather than firm requirements. The answer was obvious. The pattern would have continued and escalated. There would have been more crimes, more debts, more threats, more crises that somehow became my responsibility to solve. I would have spent the rest of my life being a supporting character in someone else's self-destructive story. Instead, I'd chosen to become the main character in my own story of recovery and growth. The letter from the DA's office included a victim impact statement form, asking if I wanted to provide input for Alaric's parole hearing in 2 years. I read through it carefully, then set it aside. I hadn't decided yet whether I wanted to participate in that process. 2 years felt like both a long time and no time at all. Long enough for him to potentially learn from the consequences of his choices, not long enough for me to trust that any change would be permanent. But that was a decision for future Amelia to make. Present Amelia had learned not to borrow trouble from tomorrow or carry guilt from yesterday. I looked around my quiet apartment, at the life I'd built from scratch after walking away from everything familiar. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I was younger, but it was entirely mine. No one could take it away from me, manipulate me out of it, or make me feel guilty for having it. For someone who'd spent most of her life believing that her worth came from what she could sacrifice for others, learning to value what I'd built for myself had been the greatest victory of all. The phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus asking if I wanted to try a new restaurant that had opened downtown. Simple question, no hidden agenda, no crisis attached. That sounds perfect, I said. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.